Hello, team players. Sickened is one of, if not the best, debuffs you can put on an enemy. However, it's also extremely rare. That means that some of you might not know all the options you have for inflicting it upon enemies. So today I'm going to be covering all the spells in Player Core 1 that you can use to inflict the Sickened condition. Let's dive in. But what is the Sickened condition? Well, for those of you that don't know, if you are sickened, then you're going to take a penalty on all your checks and DCs equal to the number that is attached to Sickened. So Sickened 1 is -1 to basically everything, and Sickened 2 is -2, and so on and so forth. But unlike the Frightened condition, Sickened does not go down on its own. Instead, in order to recover from it, a creature must spend one action retching. This lets that creature make a fortitude save against the DC of the effect that made them sickened. On a success, they reduce their sickened condition by 1 or by 2 on a critical success. However, nothing happens if they fail or critically fail. This means that getting rid of the sickened condition isn't even a guaranteed thing, unlike the frightened condition. In addition, while a creature is sickened, they cannot willingly ingest anything, which effectively means that elixirs and potions are off the table. That part doesn't come up too often for enemies, but it is something to keep in mind in case you get sickened. Now let's talk about regular spells that you can take to inflict the sickened condition upon enemies, starting with Cursed Metamorphosis. I have covered this spell in other videos, but I'm going to recover it here, for those of you that haven't seen those videos. This spell can target one creature within 30 feet, and they must make a fortitude saving throw. With this spell, you attempt to transform the target into a harmless animal. If the target succeeds on their fortitude saving throw, they partially transform into an animal and become Sickened 1. When they recover from the Sickened condition, their features revert back to normal. On a failure, they transform into a harmless animal in body but not in mind for 1 minute. If the target critically fails their save, they transform into a harmless animal, both body and mind, for an unlimited duration. Remember, guys, that this does have the incapacitation trait, which means it won't work well on bosses. But remember that this inflicts the sickened condition on a successful saving throw, making this a great 6th rank spell to pick up. And it's available to all casters except Divine, which means unless you're something like a cleric, you're going to be able to pick this spell up. Pretty nice. Speaking of Divine casters, next we have a spell for them with the 4th rank Divine Wrath. This spell targets a 20-foot burst within 120 feet. Creatures in the area must make a fortitude save against 4d10 spirit damage. On a success, a target takes half damage. However, on a failure, they take the full damage and are sickened 1. On a critical failure, the target takes the full damage, is sickened 2, and while it's sickened, it is also slowed 1, which means they lose an action every turn. You're not going to get this one unless you are a Divine caster, as it is only available to them. But Cursed Metamorphosis is available to everyone else, so clerics deserve a spell that's only available to them that causes the sickened condition. This one does not have the incapacitation trait, and it has the sanctified trait, which means you can have it do holy or unholy damage if you have that trait, making this a great spell to use on demons and celestials, depending, of course, on your deity. Next we have the 1st rank touch spell, Goblin Pox. This one is available to arcane and primal casters. The target of this spell must make a fortitude saving throw. On a successful saving throw, the target is sickened 1. On a failure, the target is inflicted with the Goblin Pox disease at stage 1. On a critical failure, they get the disease at stage 2. Goblins and goblin dogs are immune to the Goblin Pox disease. However, stage 1 is Sickened 1. Stage 2 is Sickened 1 and Slowed 1. Both of these effects take 1 round to get going. There is a stage 3 for this disease, which makes the target Sickened 1 and unable to reduce their sickened condition. However, that one takes a full day to get going, so it's not going to come up very often. However, just the fact that Arcane and Primal casters can pick up this spell at level 1 is pretty nuts. Of course, wizards have a focus spell that lets them inflict the sickened condition, but I'll get to that later in this video. But if you're an Arcane or Primal caster, this is definitely one to consider. Just remember, unless you have the reach spell feat, you're going to have to be careful with this spell because it is a touch spell. But if you're a melee spellcaster, like a druid or a magus, then this is definitely one you want to pick up. Moving on, we have another spell that I've covered before called Mariner's Curse. This is a 5th rank spell, and it is another touch spell. However, this one requires a will saving throw. On a successful saving throw, the target is sickened 1, and removing the sickened condition ends the curse. On a failure, the target is sickened 1 and can't reduce its sickened condition while the curse remains. However, the curse can be lifted by magic. Also, if the target happens to be on the sea and at least 1 mile from shore, it is also slowed 1. If they critically fail to save, they take the same effects as failure, but they are sickened 2 rather than sickened 1. Again, this is a touch spell, so unless you have reach spell, you're going to have to be careful with this one. And again, this one is available to all casters except Divine. Overall, this is just a better version of Goblin Pox, plain and simple. Before I get into focus spells, I have one more spell to cover, which I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for. And that, of course, is the 1st rank spell that is only available to occult casters, Phantom Pain. Target one creature within 30 feet, and they must make a will saving throw against 2d4 mental damage and 1d4 persistent mental damage. On a successful saving throw, the target takes the full mental damage, but no persistent mental damage. If they fail their saving throw, they take the full mental damage and the full persistent mental damage, and are also sickened 1. If they remove the sickened condition, the persistent damage ends, as well as the spell. On a critical failure, they take the effects of failure, except they are sickened 2, rather than sickened 1. If you're an occult caster, you should always pick this spell up, as it's the only 1st rank spell in the player core 1 that does damage and sickens the target. And if you played the game before, you realize how good Sickened actually is. And this spell does do good damage. It also heightens extremely well. Overall, if you're an occult caster and you don't pick up this spell, one of 2 things are true. Either you don't know about it, or you haven't built your character toward debuffing foes. Which, if you don't know about it, then this video is for you. And if you just want to buff allies, that's fine. But if you are wanting to debuff foes, this is a spell you definitely don't want to miss. Now it's time to talk about focus spells, starting with the Cleric Domain spell from the Indulgence domain, Overstuff. Target one living creature within 30 feet. They must make a Fortitude saving throw. A target that is sickened by this spell also takes a minus 10 foot status penalty to their speed until they are no longer sickened. On a success, the target is sickened 1, but if it spends an action retching, it automatically succeeds. On a failure, the target is simply sickened 1. On a critical failure, the target is sickened 2. So not only does this spell reduce their checks and DCs, it also slows them down, even on a successful saving throw. And just like other spells that give the sickened condition to enemies, they have to spend an action if they want to get rid of it. Granted, if they succeed on their saving throw, they automatically succeed in getting rid of the sickened condition. However, that is still one action that an enemy is not using to attack you or your party members. And not all enemies are smart enough to actually retch and get rid of the condition. I'm not sure how many deities actually have the Indulgence domain, But if you're a cloistered cleric and your deity has that domain, definitely pick it up. Next up, we've got 2 focus spells for the witch, starting with Evil Eye. This is the Hex spell from the Resentment patron. The target of this spell must make a will saving throw. If the target fails a save, they become Sickened 1, or if they quickly fail, they become Sickened 2. This condition value cannot be reduced as long as the spell is active and you can see the target. In other words, if you use this during combat, as long as you spend an action each turn sustaining this, they're never getting rid of that sickened condition. At least not in most cases. Because remember, a minute is a full 10 rounds, which most encounters don't even last anywhere near that long. And remember that this is a focus spell, which means you can keep using this as long as you have the time to refocus between combats. This is a great one to put on any problematic enemies, especially if they've got a low will save, which of course is where Recall Knowledge comes in. Maybe I'll do a video later on why Recall Knowledge is so important and how to use it effectively. Our second focus spell for the witch is going to be Wilding Word. This is the Hex cantrip for the Wilding Steward patron. Target 1 creature within 30 feet who must make a will saving throw. You can sustain this spell for up to 1 minute, just like Evil Eye. If the creature happens to be an animal, plant, or fungus, it takes a -1 circumstance penalty to its save. On a success, if the target would attempt an attack roll or a skill check that would harm you, it takes a -2 status penalty on that check. On a failure, it has the same effects as success, but the target also becomes Sickened 1 each time it damages you. On a failure, they become Sickened 2 every time they damage you, in addition to the other effects. Witches are usually pretty frail, so this is a great way to give enemies an incentive to attack somebody else and not you. Because it is always better if the enemies attack the tank who wants to get hit, and not you or other spellcasters who don't. And with this spell, if they do decide to attack you, and they fail their saving throw against this spell, that's good for everybody. You and your other party members. And of course, if enemies aren't attacking you, that gives you more of a chance to debuff them, like with the other spells on this list that are available to you. And lastly, for this video, we have one option for the wizard. Scramble Body is the school spell for the protean form school. You target 1 living creature within 30 feet who must make a fortitude saving throw. If they succeed on their saving throw, nothing happens. However, if they fail on their saving throw, then they're Sickened 1. If they quickly fail on their saving throw, they're Sickened 2 and slowed 1 as long as they're sickened. Unfortunately, this is not a cantrip like the other 2 I just covered, so this does require a focus point. However, this is a fantastic one to have if your school does happen to be protean form as a wizard. And it does have pretty good range on it like the other spells. It does target the foe's fortitude save, which makes it a little bit iffy, because a lot of enemies in Pathfinder 2e have high fortitude saves, which makes the witch options a little bit better, simply because number 1, they're cantrips, and number 2, they target will saves, not fortitude saves. But if you are a wizard of the protean form school, you'll probably want to use this more often than not. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like and hit that notification bell for more videos just like this one. And don't forget, guys, that you can join me on my Patreon page if you want Google Sheets for all my teamwork builds. Link is in the description. If you want some builds for the Kingmaker campaign, you can check out these videos here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.